this is really going to revolutionize how we perform our security mission at airports here in the United States, and will certainly have an international impact as well. Our leaders here at TSIF are always looking for ways to improve the testing and development capabilities, and the room in now is a great example of that. It's a newly opened test area. Maybe a year plus ago, if you walk into this room, it was basically a garage bay, and this facility, as Mario will describe, was used by the Postal Service years ago as a distribution facility. But let me just turn it over, Mario, to you. Mario Wilson is our Assistant Administrator for Acquisition Program Management, and to Mario personally and to his entire team, I think they've done a fantastic job for TSA. We are able to acquire things much faster than my own experience in government in years past. I think they found every way to establish trust and credibility, not just with us in TSA, but also with our overseers in the department, who perform a very important function of making sure that when we buy something and we spend the taxpayers' funds, that we're spending it in the most responsible way. And also, for all of you that work in acquisition program management, as you see passengers going through our screening checkpoints and you see them using the new technology, each person can say, hey, I had a role in making that happen. I had a role in making security better. I had a role in, as we've gone through the pandemic, for example, I had a role in making sure that our checkpoints were healthier than they were in the past as we went through the COVID-19 pandemic. So, Mario, let me turn the floor over to you for a little bit further explanation. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. And again, welcome to our new TSIF North lab, as you pointed out. Thank you very much for the kind words for the APM team. I will tell you that we wouldn't be successful as we are without a lot of other of you all that are listening today. So publicly, I'd love to also thank the Requirements and Capability Analysis Office, the Contracting and Procurement Office, Training Group, IT. All of us have to come together to do a lot of the great work that you comment on. A lot of that starts here in the testing facility itself. As you know, TSIF is 128,000 square feet of testing laboratories. We have many labs. This is the newest one. It's 24,000 square feet. In this building alone, we have over 20 checkpoint CT machines, many of which are in this new facility that we have here. This facility was the result of some significant collaboration between TSA's Office of Real Estate, the Requirements and Capability Analysis, specifically also their Innovation Test team, as well as APM's T&E, or Testing Evaluation Division. They all had to come together, identify resources, and build what we're in today, which is going to facilitate not only expanded testing for a lot of capabilities that you're seeing show up in airports today, but a lot of capabilities that we're going to start to deploy in the future. A lot of it started with the innovation test bed that RCA's ITF is working to expand, very similar to what they have in the ACE area out in Las Vegas. But again, I just want to welcome you to the new facility. Again, great job to everyone that's helped us pull this all together. And we look forward to using this new lab facility for all the great testing that we're going to do, that eventually will make it out to the airports for further testing and hopefully final deployments coming soon. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it, and again, appreciate your leadership. And I like to our partnership with the General Services Administration, or GSA. Any real estate work that we do almost always involves the GSA, and they've been a key partner with us going forward. Before we continue, I want to share some sadly, we've lost 2 more colleagues to COVID-19 since our last town hall. Every town hall, I say I hope this is the last person or the last couple of people that we lose to COVID-19. I'll say it again, and I would just encourage everyone to continue to follow protocols that we've put in place, and if you're not vaccinated, to get vaccinated, to avoid getting COVID-19 in a way that's going to affect your health significantly. But the first person is Ira Lerman. He was a dual function TSO at Boston Logan. He passed away in late January. Ira joined TSA in April of 2008, following a long career in finance in the Boston area. He was well liked by his colleagues and was known as a dedicated and hardworking Boston team member. I know that Ira loved bagels and often brought in large orders to share with his TSA colleagues. In his spare time, he played amateur hockey as a goalie in the over 50 men's league and was also a published author. Will be missed at Boston for his vision and for his dedicated approach to TSA's mission on a daily basis. The second person is Robert Jasinski. He was a TSO at Philadelphia International Airport, and he passed away in late January. Robert joined TSA in November of 2006 after previously working for American Airlines at numerous hubs. His proudest accomplishment was serving in the United States Marine Corps for 8 years. I am told that Robert was fiercely devoted to his family and friends and had a heart of pure gold. He always made time to sit with an elderly relative or help a friend in need. Robert was also deeply dedicated to TSA's mission and committed to providing the best possible customer service. And so, my sympathies to both Robert and Ira's families, their friends, their colleagues in TSA. And as I've mentioned in the past, we have an in memoriam page on our iShare website to remember those that have passed as a result of COVID-19 or any other cause. What I'd like to do now is shift to the bright spots part of the town hall, the opportunity for us to become aware of, in many cases, the great work that men and women at TSA have done around the country. And let me start out with Denver International Airport. At Denver International Airport, a male passenger approached the TDC podium not too long ago, and as he approached the podium, the gentleman collapsed. TSO Paul Monaghan immediately took action, rolling the passenger onto his side and calling for paramedics. LTSO Mark Stevens and LTSO Rachel Wilmoth came over to assist. In addition, STSO Skylar Cook heard the medical call and ran out to assess the passenger. Based on his EMT experience, he immediately saw the passenger's airway was obstructed and took steps to allow more room for air to flow. The paramedics arrived, and at their request, Mark and Skylar started CPR while the paramedics set up an IV and administered the AED in an attempt to get a response from the passenger. While this was happening, LTSO Elizabeth Lopez calmed the passenger's wife, and LTSO Paul Aragon Jr. stanched off the area and adjusted traffic around the situation to allow them room to work. The passenger and his wife were eventually transported to a hospital, and unfortunately the passenger did not survive. But nonetheless, the actions of our officers during this emergency situation are commendable, and we appreciate their efforts to try to save the passenger's life, and to say nothing of the appreciation I'm sure that his wife and family have for the efforts of the officers at Denver. The next is at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. Officers George Verhines and Tammy Glover discovered a CD player in an alarm bag and immediately realized it had been tampered with, even though it didn't alarm the ETD. Noticing the CD player was heavier than it should have been, George and Tammy used their network, calling STSO Anna Amador, and notified TSS Ted Krabner, who then disassembled the item. Inside the CD player, they found a sock with the frame of a firearm wrapped in black tape. Phoenix police were called to the baggage area and removed the gun, and removed a gun slide and 3 stocks, each containing 50 rounds of 9mm ammo hidden in the player. 3 magazines and another gun slide, all wrapped in black tape, were also discovered under the lining of the bag. This is a great example of being vigilant when something didn't seem right, and the importance of checking everything in and around a suspicious bag. And how often do you see something where something just doesn't feel right to an officer, and the officer, in this case both officers, plus their help from the supervisor and the TSSE, just investigated what just didn't feel right to them, and discovered prohibited items, a gun and parts that should not have been allowed into the sterile area and were not. The next is at Indianapolis International Airport. TSO Laurent Vernio was helping a passenger when a woman suddenly ran into the terminal screaming that a car was on fire outside. Laurent quickly made sure 911 was called, grabbed a fire extinguisher and raced to the airport terminal curb to put out the fire in an SUV that was billowing with smoke. Thanks to his quick action, Laurent was able to prevent injury and the fire from spreading throughout the airport. STSO Malcolm Duenas called Laurent a hero and promptly submitted a request for an on-the-spot award to display his appreciation for Laurent's commitment to protecting the public. And so I'm going to assume that on-the-spot award was granted, because that's certainly incredible work on the part of TSO Laurent. So I appreciate that as well. Next at Newark Liberty International Airport, TSOs Kim Dove and Stephanie Alexovich, LTSO Yvette Jordan, STSO Jeff Jones, and TSM Bill Lynch of Newark Liberty International Airport intercepted unauthorized bags sent down the belt by an Ethiopian Airlines employee. 5 checked bags for an international flight did not belong to a ticketed passenger, had no passenger name record, and the name tag on the bag read, "Rush Bag Rush." When Kim conducted screening on one alarm bag, she found cash in excess of $10,000 between the screen and the keyboard of a laptop. Stephanie noticed that her bag had the same suspicious tag and notified Yvette, who engaged Jeff. After Jeff and CBP interviewed the airline employee, they learned 3 other bags with the same tags had been screened and were believed to be on board the aircraft. CBP held the flight and pulled the bags off the aircraft. All bags were screened and did not pose a direct threat, but the team's work exposed an insider trying to smuggle items on board the aircraft. Next is at Jacksonville International Airport. An elderly couple headed to California was preparing to fly out of Florida's Jacksonville Airport when their suitcase disappeared after being x-rayed. Supervisory TSM Timothy Brookshire was approached by the upset woman who explained that someone had taken their bag, which contained all of her husband's Alzheimer's medication. She said she would not do so well on the trip without it. Timothy got a description of the bag and took down the passenger's information as he didn't want them to miss their flight. He checked the CCTV footage and saw that another elderly passenger had picked up the bag, likely mistaking it for his own carry-on bag, which was identical. Timothy rushed to the gate, but both the couple and the other passenger had boarded their separate flights. He then worked with the airline to coordinate with both destinations to reunite the couple with their switch bag. This was an excellent example of the importance of our partnerships and outstanding customer service, and I'm sure that all of those passengers will long remember the efforts that Timothy made to make sure that they got reunited with the right bags and had the right medication. Next at Rhode Island T.F. Green International Airport, while on her way to work, TSO Linda Papineau saw a vehicle engulfed in flames on the airport connector. Linda saw a woman in distress close to the vehicle and quickly stopped to help her. She confirmed the woman was okay, then helped her cross the airport connector divider through 2 feet of snow. Once they were safe away from the car, Linda noticed the woman didn't have any possessions. It was the day after a blizzard. All of her items were inside the burning vehicle. She gave the woman a jacket, scarf, gloves, and a blanket from her emergency bag. STSO Brian Cummings, who was also driving into work, stopped when he saw the car in flames and offered his assistance. Linda stayed with the woman until the Warwick Police Department patrol car arrived. So, all of those bright spots that we mentioned in each one of these town halls are all a constant reminder to all of us about the high personal quality of every man and woman in TSA. And I see these situations on a regular basis, and I really appreciate our officers, our FAMs, anybody in TSA who sees a situation that needs assistance, to offer that assistance and really to comfort travelers who are certainly in distress in many of these situations. So thank you to all the people we recognized for this month's virtual town hall, and I'm sure a lot of other work that didn't come up to us for our attention, but I'm sure that federal security directors and colleagues at airports and in FANS field offices know these situations, and I just really appreciate the very human approach that our men and women take to the work that they do in support of our country. The next is to remind everyone that this is Black History Month, and so we recognize Black History Month to raise awareness of the rich legacy of Black and African Americans and their remarkable contributions to our country. At TSA, diversity and inclusion are of paramount importance to our culture and mission every day. I don't think there's a town hall that's gone by in the last year and a half or so that we haven't mentioned how important diversity, inclusion, and equity are from me as the leader of TSA and to all of you as members of this great organization. I encourage you to visit AfricanAmericanHistory.gov to learn more about the extraordinary accomplishments of Black and African Americans throughout our history. It's important that we never forget about our nation's history in grappling with racial discrimination and social injustices and continue to move towards equality and justice for all. I wanted to also take a moment to mention the passing of Virgil Westdale, who was a World War II veteran and Congressional Gold Medal winner from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Virgil died recently at the age of 104. He served as a transportation security officer at Gerald Ford International Airport in Grand Rapids from 2002 to 2009. Virgil was born in Indiana to a Japanese father and an English-German mother. He got his pilot's license in college and enlisted in the Army Air Corps during World War II. He was demoted and had his pilot's license taken away when the Army discovered he was part Japanese. He fought in campaigns in Italy and France, and near the end of the war, he was transferred to the 522nd Field Artillery Battalion, where he liberated Jewish prisoners from the Dachau concentration camp in Germany. After the war, he lived in Grand Rapids and co-authored an autobiography. In addition to the Congressional Gold Medal, Virgil also received a French Legion of Honor Medal for his service during the war. I think it's important that we remember all folks that served in World War II, and certainly Virgil's continuing contribution to the security of our country and to the continuation of freedom of movement, and the safety of passengers in our system for his 7 years of service in TSA, and for a life of 104 years that certainly had an impact on literally millions of people. Next topic I'd like to talk about is TSA funding. As you may know, in the budget process, right now we're in what's called fiscal year 2022. You might have seen some media reports about the work that Congress is doing on appropriating a final budget for federal agencies for 2022. But in the meantime, we work on the fiscal year 2023 budget. So that budget is in effect, arguably, if all things go well, from the 1st of October of 2022 until the 30th of September of 2023. We submitted our budget to the Office of Management and Budget about a month ago, and all I will say is that I can't give details of what's in the budget until it's finally approved and released by the President. But our top priorities that I mentioned earlier in this town hall are also a priority of our secretaries to improve and make sure that our compensation practices in TSA are equitable to employees in other federal agencies, and to invest in technology for the agency. And so while I can't give a lot of detail at this point in time, I am very pleased with the deliberations to date, and I look forward to the budget being released. I believe shortly after the President delivers his State of the Union address, which right now is scheduled for the 1st of March. So I would expect that sometime by mid-March or so, our FY23 budget will be out, and then we can talk in a lot more detail about what's in that budget. I had a question at the last town hall on the TSA Honorary Awards program, and one of the things, the question was, when are we going to have the award ceremony? And I answered that we were going to have it pretty close to the anniversary of Baltimore-Washington Airport being federalized, which was the first airport federalized as TSA stood up in 2002. What we've since decided is that we are going to do our honorary award ceremony virtually. And so we will soon announce our honorary award winners for 2021, and an opportunity for us to recognize the best at TSA. And the reason we decided to do it virtually rather than in person is because I just think we need to be mindful that I don't want to get too far into the year and not recognize our honorary award winners for 2021. And so we felt that, hey, it's probably better, given the uncertainty of whether or not we can actually gather together at the end of April, that we just go ahead with the virtual ceremony. So you'll see that, and we plan to release a recording on the ceremony in iShare in the next couple of weeks. We've already recorded parts of it, and I think you'll really like what you see. But the most important part of that ceremony is just listen to what is being recognized, and the great work, as I talked about just a few minutes ago, the great work of people in TSA. There are more than 700 people and team members who are either receiving individual awards or team awards, and it's really a true testament to their work in TSA and their service to our country. So I encourage you to tune in to this very special event and help us pay tribute to each winner and their extraordinary accomplishments. And as you're tuning in, just wish that we can do it in person when it comes time to do the 2022 honorary awards. The other thing to highlight for everybody, that on March 2nd, so not too far away, the Federal Air Marshal Service, a critical part of the Transportation Security Administration, will celebrate its 60th anniversary. So the Federal Air Marshal Service is 40 years older than the Transportation Security Administration. So that's a tremendous milestone to hit the 60th anniversary. In the days leading up to that date, we will be sharing posts on iShare recognizing the tremendous contributions of FAMs that they've made to aviation security since the founding of that organization in 1962. In addition, we'll have a national press release to commemorate that event. Another update for you is on a new position that we're establishing in our screening operations. It's going to be called the Security Support Assistant position. And the reason we're establishing this new position is to be able to bring men and women who are interested in serving their country, are interested in particular in serving in TSA, on board our organization quicker than we currently can do with our process of all of the checks and all of the reviews and all the testing that we do. The idea is to bring individuals on board. They will be hired at the D band. They will be not to exceed at most 2 years. The idea is to bring them on board quickly, have them get into the TSA workforce, and then our hope is that they would eventually meet all of the qualifications for certification as a TSO and proceed down that path, and then they'll proceed down the path of every TSO. Initially, we expect that our security support assistants, as we hire them, will be able to help with queue management, providing passenger assistance, act in the divesting position, moving bins back and forth, and supporting exit lanes, and any other collateral or non-screening duties. And so these are assistant positions. They are not airport screeners. And we just feel it's a way to bring more capacity and more capability into TSA, with the idea that a good portion of these individuals would eventually meet all the qualifications for certification in any of the certified TSO positions. So for example, they won't be required to complete the CBT, the computer-based test, or a medical evaluation, which those two things by themselves will greatly reduce the amount of time it takes to bring somebody on board. Our goal is to make these job offers hopefully within about 4 weeks. What we find is in many locations there's a lot of interest in joining TSA, but when you say to an individual, hey, it's going to be a couple of months before we can bring you on board, that tends to result in them looking for something else to do in the meantime, and oftentimes they never do join TSA. So the SSAs, as we're going to call them, will be able to complete the CBT and medical evaluation once they are on board, and then once they successfully pass the test, they will be non-competitively reassigned to a TSO position. And these positions have already been posted in USA Jobs, and we will soon be accepting applications at 18 airports across the country. The goal is to expand it nationwide. We thought, hey, it's probably best to start with a smaller set of airports and really to fine-tune our process. And our hope is that this initiative will allow candidates to onboard more quickly and have the ability to compete after they complete more time in some of the training programs that we have, to be able to complete the CBT and the medical exam. The other thing that you've probably seen is last week we released HCAM 13. So HCAM is Human Capital Administrative Memo. We've used HCAMs for 2+ years now. It seemed like we were issuing a new HCAM almost like every other week, because we were changing our personnel policy so much to be able to respond to the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. But last week we issued the 13th version. With this issue, we have updated many of the personnel flexibilities that the agency has made available since the beginning of the pandemic. So, and there's a summary in the HCAM that kind of tells you what specifically was changed. But I'll mention a few of them here. While we continue to use our legal authority and flexibility, we have aligned leave and allowances to correspond with the CDC's recently updated isolation and quarantine guidance. So you remember probably about a month or so ago, CDC updated their isolation guidance. And so what our HCAM does is it reduces the eligibility to 5 days of weather and safety leave if directed to quarantine following a workplace exposure. And then it reduces eligibility to 5 days of administrative leave excused absence if an employee is unable to work due to a new diagnosis of COVID-19, and requires employees to use personal leave such as annual or sick leave if unable to meet the return to duty requirements following quarantine or isolation. And so you can find the full version of the HCAM on our iShare page. What the HCAM reflects and the updated CDC guidance reflects, because they're both very much synchronized with each other, is what we learned with the Omicron variant. The Omicron variant infects people very quickly. and people tend to recover much quickly from Omicron. And we saw that in our data. We saw going into the second, third week of December a rapid rise in cases, and then in the second week of January a rapid decline in cases, down to the 600 people now who are still in quarantine or isolation, which is down quite a bit from its peak in December or in early January. We have a couple of leadership departures that I'd like to highlight for you. The first is Mike Ondison, who is the Executive Assistant Administrator for Law Enforcement, and he's the Director of the Federal Air Marshal Service. Mike has served incredibly well as the Director of our Federal Air Marshal Service. He has improved the operation of our Federal Air Marshal Service and has made significant adjustments, I think, to the benefit of our Federal Air Marshals, and certainly very consistent with our risk-based approach to security across the organization. Mike has served honorably in law enforcement and security for over 3 decades. He was a police officer and a sergeant in the NYPD, and he was one of the thousands of Federal Air Marshals who signed up right after September 11th. I first met Mike on one of my very first trips as the administrator. I went from here in DC up to Boston, and so I went to Boston Logan Airport and then over to the Federal Air Marshal Field Office. And when I first met Mike, I was really impressed with his just innate leadership capability and his energy level and his vision for what TSA and the Federal Air Marshal Service can and should be. And I really want to thank Mike publicly for his immense contributions. Mike followed David Cole, who was the director when I first came in. Mike was the deputy director, and then Mike was promoted to the director when David retired. And the two of them together have, I think, significantly advanced our ability to provide in-flight security and our ability to provide law enforcement presence in the airports and at various fusion centers around the country. And so, Mike, really thank you very much for your years of service to TSA, your years of service at the NYPD. We wish you nothing but continued success in the future. The other person that left is Victoria Newhouse. Victoria was the Deputy Assistant Administrator in our Policy and Engagement Office. And Victoria was one of the first people that I met when I came into TSA, much like Mike. And she really helped me, along with Eddie Mainsheim, who was our Assistant Administrator, understand our relationship with our industry partners, understand our regulatory framework and our policy framework, and how we engaged effectively with them. Victoria was she was the executive sponsor for one of our advisory committees. We have 2 advisory committees that are established by Congress that provide advice to the entire leadership of the organization, all voluntary. And one is the Aviation Security Advisory Committee, and the other is the Surface Transportation Security Advisory Committee. So Victoria was the executive sponsor for ASAC, and I, in fact, just talked to the Aviation Security Advisory Committee this morning, and it just highlighted all the great work that they were doing. And they've done that great work under the guidance and with the help of Victoria Newhouse. And Victoria will not be leaving the aviation community, and so it's a really good example of somebody who's dedicated many, many years to TSA, has significant expertise in aviation security, who will be continuing to work in aviation security into the future. So I wish Victoria nothing but success as well. Next person is a person that many of you heard on these calls as we went through the pandemic. Is Jill Seagraves, and Jill was our Operational Safety, Health, and Environment Division Director. And you can remember in the early stages of the pandemic, Dr. Fabrice Zarnacki, and Jill Seagraves were 2 of the people that, when we had questions or we had something particularly technical to relay that I was not particularly good at, I would often turn to Fabrice or to Jill to help explain something. And I had the opportunity, along with Stacy Fitzmaurice, who's our Deputy Administrator, and Myung Kim, who is our Deputy Chief of Staff, to say goodbye to Jill in person yesterday as she finished up her last days in TSA. And I think when I think of Jill, I think of all the work that she's done, another long career in TSA, that she has done to make sure that we are all protected in the work that we do. And I thought she was really, really sharp, did a lot of research on things that impacted our workforce, and really, I thank Jill for us having fewer COVID-19 infections in TSA. And even though she's retiring, things that Jill brought to TSA, she was a great mentor to a lot of people. She was very much an innovator, and she was really committed to the job. I think that those things that she brought will continue to endure in the agency. But she was just somebody who had that skill of being able to take on a very difficult job that involved personally all of us, and making sure that we heard what she had to say, understood what she had to say, and were willing to follow her very good advice. So with that, let me end my formal part of the program and just turn to the question and answer session. I'm sure that there are a lot of questions. Alexa Lopez, who's our Assistant Administrator for Strategic Comms and Public Affairs, is off to my right, and she has all the questions that have come in. And as always, we have our team of experts on the phone right here. And so for questions that I think would provide, you get a better answer, a more complete answer from one of our key leaders in TSA, I will turn to them to help me answer it. So Alexa, why don't we go ahead and fire away at questions.
All right, thank you, sir. The first question, I'll start with a couple of ServU questions. So the first one is, where are we with ServU? They are losing and not processing personnel actions, and it's affecting pay and seniority.
Yeah, I'll lead off, and then I'll turn this over to Pat Bradshaw, who is our Assistant Administrator for Human Capital. But I would just say that, hey, I understand the frustration with ServU. I have the same frustration. I want to make sure that systems we have serve our organization as best we can. And we've made some improvements to ServU over time. We're not quite where we need to be just yet, and everybody knows it, and everybody's working really hard to address it. I would also use this opportunity before Pat gets on to just recognize, as I travel around to airports and I talk with the FSD staffs, and I just think about all the work that the human resources, the IT, the real estate specialists, sometimes the legal staff, depending on the airport, all of our inspectors. I just think of all the work that they do that is so important for us to get the work we need to get done so well. And I would just highlight our human resources, our professionals in particular. I mean, we ask a lot of them. Oftentimes they are a staff of one to be able to serve very large airports. And then they've had the challenges with this information system that is not performing as we had envisioned it to perform. And so I would just like to recognize our HR professionals out in the field, and certainly Pat Bradshaw is leading that community of practice in TSA. So Pat, over to you.
Thank you very much, sir, and I thank everyone for the question. I want to thank everybody on the call because you have endured a lot of pain and suffering that we all appreciate, trying to get to the end game, which is a fully functioning system that performs as we had hoped. This journey has been a long journey with challenges that none of us could have anticipated. To that end, and all of this being said, in December timeframe, as we realized that even with the fixes that we were implementing, we continued to find additional problems, we paused and decided to take a strategic view towards accelerating the fixes with our vendor. And so we have committed a lot of additional resources to working towards very specific fixes that will, first of all, the focus was improving our TSO hiring. In the month of January, we saw a very significant rollout of fixes that we've gotten good reports from the field that it is working and allowing our TSO candidates to move through the cycle time faster to get to actual onboarding. The month of February, we continue to accelerate these fixes. There will be another tranche of releases that will focus on improving TSO hiring, as will major acceleration fixes for the month of March. So many of you will say, well, what about me? I'm a MAP employee. We are moving concurrently to roll out a new tool called USA Staffing. Melody Armstrong and her team are leading that effort with the Office of Personnel Management to implement a tool by the end of March, the beginning of April, that will facilitate that hiring process as well. With regard to the ongoing day-to-day processes of pay, reassignments, and things that affect your pay, we continue to implement fixes along that line as well. We anticipate the USA staffing tool will also help with that. I would also highlight that we have been able to implement fairly quickly some new innovative hiring incentives, whether they're readiness awards, other twists to incentive awards, or retention awards. And each time we do that requires us to make adjustments to the system. And sometimes that has led to some of the delays that many of you are experiencing. So we, again, thank you for your patience. We are working with the airport in particular to help them process the paperwork in a timely fashion and in a way that will improve and accelerate the accuracy and the timeliness of your pay actions. So again, I thank you. Bear with us. We're going to continue to see improvement in the coming months. Thank you, sir.
No, thanks, Pat. And you highlighted well. I mean, human capital's plate is more than full. I just mentioned HCAM 13. There's a lot of work that goes into developing policy and then writing the memorandum that memorializes it. We've done a lot of work on, and we talked about this in the last town hall, is to how do we design pay equity within TSA. Pat's team was leading the charge on that, and a very thoughtful and I think a very impactful end result. And then, hey, it's been hard for everybody to hire new employees. I mean, talk to any airport, talk to any carrier, talk to any surface transportation system operator. I mean, being able to hire people has been a challenge across the country, and that's been a particular challenge for our human capital team. And finally, with all of the incentives that we've been able to put in place to recognize the great work of our men and women in TSA, there's a lot of back-end work that goes into processing all those readiness incentives, for example. And the team worked really hard to get those out on time, and I know we all appreciate that. So thank you, Pat.
Just a follow-up to that, why does ServU not have live individuals you can speak to when you have questions or issues? Will this be a feature in the future?
And so, Pat,
that's for you. So we eliminated the phone call system because we found that that was a 3-tier system, and we still were required to have people to answer at the other end. And so we did not have enough resources to be able to do that. We have streamlined the customer care tool. We have implemented very triage, creative technology that is able to sort the questions as they come in and provide the answers in a more efficient way. So we've inserted technology into the customer care ticketing system, and I think you will start to see that roll out, particularly like in the retirement area very soon. Just let me take a moment, sir, to highlight the end of this month. Everybody who is interested, whether you're going to ask for retirement calculation, you want to make a military deposit, anything that fits into that category, we will be rolling out a new tool that will allow you to, instead of going through the customer care system, it will automatically send you off to the retirement team. And so we are trying to make those kind of improvements to get you to the SME, the expert who can provide answers to your questions. And additionally, the most important part is by September, we will be rolling out self-service technology so that you will be able to solve some of these questions and solution your own issues on your own. So that's why we do not have people answering the phone right now. They're building the tools that will enable you to do a lot of this yourself. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Pat. The next question, the last system question is, the FSMS financial modernization system has been malfunctioning daily and in some cases is no longer accurately reporting financial information from the field. Is there a plan to ensure these issues are addressed? We got a few questions on this one.
Okay, so I think Julie Scanlon, that might be best for you to address. Certainly, important time of year. Not that any time is not important to be able to understand what's left in the checkbook, if you will. So, Julie, if you could take the response to that question, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you. There have been some connectivity issues with the FMS system, and we will be looking into them. We're working very closely with the department and with the owners of the system. So I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but we will continue to work to make sure that it is as seamless as possible.
Okay, thanks, Julie.
All right. Next question is on remote work. Also quite a few on these. The revised MD for the Telework program, Associated Handbook and HCAM 2021 30-5 was issued on December 16th, 2021 and modifies the definition of telework to exclude full-time telework, renaming it remote work. Telework and remote work for management, administrative, and professional MAP employees are critical tools to remain competitive in the current job market, especially in the National Capital Region. We are losing selectees for vacancies, and employees are considering departing TSA. Can you please provide an update on OPM publishing the remote work guide and TSA's plans for issuing associated guidance or leaning forward without OPM work guide? Also related, can you please provide an update on when TSA plans to issue the return to workplace guidance?
Okay, great question. And we've talked about return to workplace. It's now called the re-entry plan. And I think over the past 2 or 3 town halls, I've said to folks, it's going to be out in a week or so. Well, it's still not out. And the reason why it's still not out is because kind of twofold. One is we didn't want to send it out in the middle of Omicron. We wanted to make sure we were definitely on the backside of that variant for COVID-19. Secondly, OPM has revised some of the core guidance, and so we wanted to incorporate that revised guidance from OPM. What I've said all along is I would highlight 2 key things. One is I'm a firm believer in telework and remote work as defined now by OPM. I've seen it work very, very well for those positions that are eligible for that work arrangement. And so just know that there's strong support for continuing to provide the flexibility. And I agree with your comment that, hey, to be competitive in the marketplace for administrative employees in particular, we're going to have to provide that flexibility. But I would just caveat that by saying I'd provide it anyway because I think it's really effective, and I have been really impressed over the past 2 years with what we've been able to do remotely. And the second point, so the first point is continued support for working outside the workplace within the guidance and the framework that we will soon publish. And I won't say next week on this town hall, but I think it's really soon. The second part is that I also promised everybody that you would have 45 days from the time we said, hey, this plan is in effect. And we will continue with that promise. So whatever you see, you know that you have 45 days before we put those provisions into force. And the reason for that is, I wanted to provide everybody that is eligible for alternative work arrangements like this to be able to make whatever plans they need to make in terms of their own personal situation. So still 45 days. 2 other things to note is from my discussions with other people that are in similar positions in federal agencies to mine, we are among the most liberal in the application of these workplace flexibilities. And so I would just keep that in mind because I do want to make sure that we can bring in the very best talent into TSA as we have in the past. And I want to be able to provide as much flexibility to our hiring managers in that regard. And so let me turn to Julie Scanlon. Julie has the pen for our reentry plan. I know it's in very final form. And the Omicron consideration is no longer a consideration. We still have Omicron infections, don't get me wrong, but we're down to 600 people in isolation or quarantine in TSA. So I think it's it's appropriate once we're ready to put that reentry plan out so people can see it, and then you'll have the 45 days before it's implemented. So, Julie, anything additional you'd like to add?
Yes, sir, you've covered it precisely. We are targeting to get it out within the next 10 days or so. Along with it, earlier in December, we had published our telework guidance, so that will be working in conjunction with the reentry plan. And we will also be issuing some remote work guidance. It won't be final, but it'll be interim guidance that will help managers and employees understand what our intent is going forward. So that should all be out within the next 10 days, and 45 days later, we should be able to implement it. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thanks, Julie.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you, Julie. Next question is on TSO compensation. Regarding the TSA proposal to improve compensation, will the TSO non-competitive 3-rung career ladder apply to non-TSO employees? For example, would this apply to an E-band administrative assistant to non-competitively promote to an F-band after 7 years of service?
Yeah, the plan as designed does not. It applies in the journeyman sense to the screening workforce. So DEF band or GS 579. And let me just turn to Pat. Pat, anything additional you'd like to say? I would just, before I turn it over to you though, note that that doesn't mean that because it's not in the plan now, that it might not be embedded in the plan in a future iteration. But when we designed our pay equity proposal, we included only the ladder program, the automatic promotion program for the Transportation Security Officer cadre. So, Pat, over to you.
Thank you, sir. For the non-TSO, the MAP employees, what we already have today and what this will just continue to reinforce is the opportunity to build career ladders. So if you think about it in the Title V world, you come in as a GS5, and if the job is announced with the opportunity to be non-competitively promoted because you meet certain qualification requirements, whether it's going to classes, whether it's skill sets, whatever, 579, it could be an EFG, an HIJ, but that will continue to be available under the new pay structure as we have it today, but we just have to announce it. And the same with the TSOs. It's automatically, but they will still have to meet quals because, again, the TSO ladder has certain certification requirements already built into the plan as well. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
The next question is on the user lose. It appears there was some confusion concerning the blanket restored leave over the past 2 years. Individuals were not aware that the restored leave in 2019 needed to be used in 2021 until reading the ServeU email that was sent out on February 7th. The question is whether staff can submit a corrected time card for pay periods in 2021 to account for the unexpected forfeited 2019 restored leave, or if the administrator could extend the 2022 blanket leave restoration to include all 2019 restored leave that was forfeited this year.
Okay, great question. Pat, let me turn to you first.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to have to take that back to the team and understand the mechanics of whether the corrections can be for your leave. So given the question, we'll go ahead and take that for action and put out something to the agency through one of the ServeU notices to address that.
Great, thank you.
All right, moving on to a couple questions on the new SSA position. If a new SSA employee is hired as full-time, are they guaranteed a full-time TSO position when they transition after meeting all requirements?
Yes, it's going to be a once they, the last part's important, when they meet all the requirements, that's a non-competitive assignment. And Pat, anything you want to clarify on that?
I think the way we've structured this implementation is that will be up to each airport to decide what the requirement is at the time of the conversion. So I think that will be dependent upon the needs of the airport at the time of the actual conversion to the TSO.
Yeah, no, thanks for that clarification. So, you know, if they still need TSOs, then that's a non-competitive conversion, correct?
Correct. That is a non-competitive conversion, assuming they pass the CDT and the medical.
Yep.
And the part-time versus full-time will be dependent upon the needs of the airport at the time.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
And just to follow on to that, do these jobs offer health insurance?
Yes, they do. And it would be health insurance, Pat, I'm going to assume, just as any other full-time employee or part-time employee, correct?
Just like any other part-time employee.
Okay. But if you're a full
Not TSO.
right, but if you're a full-time SSA, do you get the same health care as any other full-time employee?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
All right, I'm going to shift gears to COVID and vaccine as the last few questions. For the mask mandate, are there any updates regarding the extension or an end to President Biden's mask mandate for federal transportation now that cases are going down? And if the mask mandate does end, how will the mandates for TSA work in regards to states that continue to mask and states that have discontinued mask mandates?
Sure. So the requirement for masks is a federal requirement. So you know, individual state requirements are secondary to the federal requirement. We have always relied on the guidance from the Centers for Disease Control. And we rely on that guidance for the protection of our own employees. I just mentioned you know, the change in the quarantine isolation. That's based on a CDC recommendation. So we will follow the same recommendation for our employees, but our employees are part of the transportation system, of course. And you know, as you know, there's a CDC order to wear masks across the entire transportation system, whether it's in an airport, at a bus terminal, on board a bus, in a mass transit system. And so again, we would just rely on CDC's guidance with respect to, hey, what is the science telling us about whether or not we should continue mask wear in transportation systems? So answer is, we'll follow CDC guidance for mask wear in transportation systems, and then any additional requirements for our workforce are also based on CDC requirements, and we'll follow those as well. And we've always been very mindful of what CDC has recommended, because while we have medical professionals in TSA, CDC has deep expertise, and I know our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Zarnacki, interacts with the CDC all the time to represent TSA's equity. So you know, I think that's served us well for two plus years of following their guidance, and we'll continue to do that. So the answer to, hey, what dates might things change at? I don't know the answer to that yet, because the CDC has not changed any guidance that they have.
Thank you, sir. And on vaccines, are there any updates to the President's executive order requiring vaccine mandates for federal executive employees?
The only update I would offer, and this has been reported in the media, that the federal appeals court, so the original injunction on the President's executive order was issued by a federal district court. If it gets appealed, it gets appealed to the appellate level. An appeals court upheld the district court's judgment. And so now it's just at a decision point as to whether or not the Department of Justice wants to appeal it to the Supreme Court. And really, from where we sit, we will follow all of the guidance that comes out of the federal courts, as we have. I mean, we went back and readjusted readiness incentive criteria based on the court ruling, and we stopped all enforcement of the President's executive order the same day that the court ruling came out. So we will continue to follow the court's guidance.
All right, thank you, sir. We'll just do one more question.
Sure. Yep.
And this, just because we received this quite a few times, how will time and grade step increases be calculated for those who were in a higher pay band before restructuring in 2016?
Good question. Pat, you're going to be in much better position to answer that question than I am.
Sir, these are some of the very technical questions to which we do not have answers at the moment.
Yeah.
We will continue to develop the policies and the mechanics around how this might work, because there will be several options. So At this point, we do not have a proposed answer to that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, to wrap up, one of the things that I'd like to do, I mentioned earlier that I had the opportunity to visit the Canine Training Center down at Lackland Air Force Base last week, and you know, one of the things that's pretty amazing about TSA, among many things, is our canine program. It's the largest explosive detection canine program outside of DoD in the country, and the CTC and all of our handlers across the entire enterprise do amazing work each and every day to facilitate screening and also to provide that mobile screening capability in and around transportation systems, airports, transit hubs, and things like that. What I'd like to do is highlight the canine program overall, because I think everybody would find it really interesting. Some of the things that we've done at the CTC to continue to advance the science, to continue to advance the breeding capabilities here in the United States, to be able to provide the very best capability and a very visible capability. And in that vein too, just to congratulate SCPA. I mean, you put out the annual canine calendar, which a lot of people just love that calendar. I'm one, and just credit to all of you for capturing those images and all the narrative that goes on that camera set. So if we could build into one of the future town halls just a little canine demonstration and a little bit of talk about our canine program, because I'm really very proud of that program, and I'm very proud of all of you and the great work you do each and every day. I really enjoy these town halls. I hope you got some good information today, and rest assured we'll have even more information when we do our March town hall, because we won't do our March town hall until after the budget is out. And so once the budget is out, because that's going to be a key question on everybody's mind, particularly with respect to pay equity, I want to have the budget released so we can talk more fully about all that. So just plan on the March town hall being after the budget's released. And in the meantime, I look forward to the opportunity to meet many of you in my travels around the country in the coming month. And I thank Mario for joining us today at this virtual town hall at the TSIF, and Alexa and your entire team that's in front of all of us that put all this on and make sure that all the video and audio recordings are done really well. And again, thanks for that video at the very beginning. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, sir. And the video, I'm not sure if it works, but we'll tack it on and get it out for everyone to see.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And this concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time.